I'm bored. Let's read a book. Oh!
Off to the left was a line of trees that met the road about 2 k's ahead of what looked to be a grove. Under the pale blue sky, warmed by the winter sun, the frost and whatever snow might have fallen earlier had melted away from the road, and the stubble of fields and occasional meadows. Now we had crossed Montegrim George and passed into Syrtis. The occasional fenced field and extensive sheep meadows had largely given way to entirely fenced fields, now covered with maize stubble or other grain stalks. The huts were larger, and many even boasted wood lots back away from the road. But the landscape and the countryside were boring. After all, how much creativity is there in fences and huts? And how long can you pass them without being lulled into a stupor by their similarities? Justin did not talk much, and I did not press the Grey Wizard. Gerlach tossed his head, prancing for an instant, then slowing down. Whatever it was, Rosefoot agreed with Gerlach. I looked at Justin. "They're thirsty," he said. "Is that a stream up ahead?" "I believe so. There is even a pavilion of sorts there, if I recall." "Pavilion?" "A roof erected on the four timbers. Nothing more than a rain shelter." "A rain shelter we didn't need. But it was probably better than stopping the roadside." The pavilion was there, but a nearby oak had pulled up its roots, toppled, and broken the ridgepole. Between the fallen green oak and the collapsed pavilion, most of the travelers' area was unusable, although a path worn by other travelers led down a drop of half a rod to the stream. At the top of the incline, I dismounted and led Gerlach toward the water. He tossed his head, and I studied the trees that stood back off the watercourse. I saw nothing, and I tried to sense chaos. Nothing there either. I know it's not a worm stable, but it is decent water. Standing upstream from Gerlach, I smelled the water, looked it from my hands, and felt it with my mind. Nothing, just good cold water. So I drank some, scooping it up with my hands while trying not to slip off the brown grass tuft where I squatted. Then, after wiping my face on my sleeve, I filled the canteen and replaced it in its holder. Justin, where was he? I grabbed for the staff, then eased up the incline to the rest area. The Grey Wizard was nowhere to be seen, but a man in a soldier's vest and a chainmail shirt appeared from behind the mound of a collapsed thatch, a plate skullcap secured with leather thongs. His sword was unsheathed and pointed in my direction. "Another pilgrim." His voice was raspy, his brown beard scraggly, and his step measured. I could have outrun him, even to Gerlach, but I didn't know where Justin was, and who might be with the soldier, and whether they might have a crossbow, a longbow, or a rifle. So I took an even hold on the staff, arranged my feet, and waited. "What do you want?" I asked. It seemed like a fair question, even to a maniac with a glint in his eye and a sword in his hand. "Just your horse and money." "That's a bit much." "Dang pilgrim, they're all alike." I let the first stroke pass by. Thunk. Even I surprised how unskillful he was at watching his sword fly onto the hard clay. I waited to see if he would go for the sword on the ground or the knife at his belt. His eyes darted from mine to the staff and to the sword and back. Then he sighed. "Quarter?" I nodded. Click. I ducked and turned. Shh. The blade of the heavier man nipped at the edge of my cloak, and I wish I had discarded it as I staggered sideways. His foot skidded on something, and he stepped back. I used the instant to duck out of my cloak, regaining a balanced stance and concentrating on the unshaven and grizzled veteran before me. His eyes were bloodshot, but his hand seemed steady enough. His blade dipped, then turned. I did not move, watching eyes and edge simultaneously. He stepped back and sheathed the sword, daring to wizards. "Begging your pardon, sir, but I did not know which kind you were." I tried not to let the confusion show as I looked from the one who was trying to stand on a very sore leg to the older man who watched us both. Both soldiers' leather vests had 2 irregular light patches on the shoulders, and 2 small holes within the lighter colored space. Wing-like insignia had recently been removed. Their chainmail shirts were scarcely qualified as armor, except to prevent against spent arrows and weak slashes, but their swords had been serviceable enough. Neither one bore the taint of chaos, neither did they exactly radiate order, which left the possibility of unpleasant mercenaries running out on their contracts and turning bandit. I wished Justin were around, but the Grey Wizard seemed to have vanished. "Wizard problems?" I asked. Just wizard problems?" I added. The older man, mostly gray-haired, although he did not look much older than Justin, spat onto the road. The younger looked at the sword lying on the frozen clay. "You can get it if it stays in the scabbard." I did not relax my control of the staff until he sheathed the sword. "You still have to explain why I shouldn't do something unpleasant to you." "Ha! Begging your pardon, young wizard, but you can't." The older soldier spat again and looked toward Gerlach, who edged backwards, but otherwise not making a sound. "That's not quite true, friend," I smiled presently. "I cannot do anything destructive, but what if I were to decide that with each unpleasant act you do, your nose would grow a thumb? Or that you would begin to grow again?" "What?" asked the one I had disarmed, looking toward me, then toward his companion. The older man swallowed. "You're young to do that." I smiled. "I don't know if I'd necessarily do it right, but even a mistake wouldn't hurt me, as long as it don't involve chaos." He blanked. "We're hungry," I added. "That wizard, he didn't keep the Duke from getting killed, or the rain from getting the crops." "Why didn't you stay with the new Duke? Dukes always need soldiers." The two looked back and forth. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the story, but I shifted my grip on the staff. Finally, the younger one swallowed again. "Well, it wasn't our choice. Grancer, he was the squad leader that sent us out on some roundup for pilgrims." I must have raised my eyebrows. The older man added quickly, "This was under the old Duke, you understand. They must have heard about us coming. They were all gone from what we were staying." "Where was that?" "In Freetown. The Traveler's Rest, it was called." "Was called?" "The wizard burned it. He had a hard time, even with his helper. We didn't see that. Grantor set us out before they left the city." The younger ruffian looked around, then back at me, and swallowed. A thin cloud drifted across the pale sun as the wind picked up, throwing a few dry leaves onto the roadway. We caught up, Herds here and me and Dort and Sims, with 2 of their women. Hard blonde woman and a looker, black-haired. I wish we hadn't found them. Dort never knew what happened. "What did happen?" I prompted. The blonde put a throwing knife through his throat so quick I didn't see it happen. He's down gurgling and clutching at his neck, and Sims jerks out his blade and tries to spit her. Except the looker has a blade, and she makes him look like a recruit. The older man, Harris, coughed and spat. I looked at him. Fighter has a right, he acknowledged. There were still 2 of you. Harris glared at me. The nasty blonde had 2 knives left and she wanted to use them both. The older woman's a born killer. She never raised a sweat, and she smiled when she killed Sims. So you let him go? They looked back and forth. Finally, the younger one looked at the ground and said, I yelled for help, and the second squad came from the other side of the market. Not all of them, but there were 3. Don't tell me that the 2 women butchered them too. I let my voice get sarcastic, even though I was enjoying hearing them, how Ren and Crystal had mangled some of the Duke's forces. Not all of them. One guy, Gorson, got away with just losing his right hand and a shoulder wound. They killed the other 2. And you 2 just left them? Finally, Hearn spat again. They were witches. They were from Recluce. No way I'd go against devils like that. Where'd they go? Fighter shrugged, his eyes avoiding me. I guess they went to Kyphros. The Ordok likes good woman blades. They didn't take this road, and that leaves the mountain road over the coast. Sir Wizard, you don't look at all that surprised. Herds didn't look at me. I've crossed blades with the dark-haired one. Blades? Staff against blade. Harris stepped back. I'm really sorry, sir, real sorry. Wish I'd never met either one of you. Vider followed his example and backed away. Then both of them were walking in quickly, almost running, looking over their shoulders as they headed back in the direction of Weavit. I watched them go, my mouth half open. Very impressive, young Laris. Justin sat astride Rosefoot, next to the toppled oak, watching. As I suspected he had been all along. That he had left me to fight them alone angered me, even as I was proud that I had managed it. But Justin wouldn't care one way or another. How did you do that without the heat waves? Justin smiled. That takes practice. You could do it right now with the distortion lines, but you'll have to equalize the temperature on both sides of the mirror to avoid what you call heat waves. I'll explain some of it while we ride. The rest is in your book. Rosefoot had a drink while you were dispatching that pair. The rest is in your book, as I said. Justin did not move the reins, but Rosefoot turned and carried him away from the clearing in the wayside grove and back onto the main roadway. My book? Laris, it doesn't take a mind reader to see your thoughts. You're clearly from Recluce. You have talents to be first-class order master, and you were surprised, not curious. Be surprised to see my copy of the basis of order. The Grey Wizard looked ahead, toward the southeast. I ignored him and went to Garlock. Not that I had far to go. He waited just at the top of the incline. I almost fell off and, scrambling into place and catching up with Justin and Rosefoot. More smoke plumes rose into the pale blue sky, angling toward the northwest. Behind the wind I could see the clouds building again. Over the hills in the distance, to the southeast, with the warmth of the sun and the southern air, might come rain, or worse, sleet. How far to Jellicoe? I asked as we came abreast of him. More than another day. How many other towns are there along the way? The Grey Wizard smiled faintly, a scattering, though few with inns, and fewer still with the size of Weavit, or even Howlet. We rode a time further before I asked another question. How can you hide in plain sight so that I cannot see you or the heat waves? That is the same question. The Grey Wizard coughed and cleared his throat before continuing. What is sight? I tried not to sigh. I asked a simple question, and instead of an answer, I got another question. Sight is when you see someone or something. Just inside. What is the physical process of sight? Did not anyone teach you that? I looked as puzzled as I felt, not understanding what he had in mind. Light comes from the sun. Chaotic white light. It strikes an object and reflects from that object. The act of reflection partially orders the light. Those reflected rays enter your eyes. What you see is not the object at all, but the light reflected from that object. That is why you cannot see when there is no light. Now, it really is not that simple. Those are the basics. Do you understand what I mean? I wasn't that dense. Of course, my eyes see a reflection of reality, but not reality itself. That means that when I feel things, that feeling may be truer than sight. Justin nodded, without taking his eyes from the road or looking at me. I remember that some things cannot be felt, and many chaos-charged objects are not real, but can hurt nonetheless. But you were right. He cleared his throat again. There are many ways not to be seen, but they all involve two ideas. The first is touching someone's thoughts so that they do not know they have seen something. That is the chaos way because it destroys the link between perception and reality. The way of order, I prompted, that is much more complicated. I nodded at that. Anything involving order was more complicated. Light is not straight like an arrow, not exactly, but like a wave upon the ocean. Light can be woven with the mind, although it takes practice, and you weave the light around you so that it never quite touches you. Actually, as it is not as difficult as an exercise, but using it can be very dangerous unless your non-visual perceptions are well developed. Non-visual perceptions? Just when I got the idea, he added something else. What you call feeling out things. Oh, but why? Justin shook his head, muttering something about basic psychology and wave theory. Finally, we had ridden up a gentle slope that overlooked a park-like setting. Unlike the Ks and Ks of peasant fields, hogs, and huts we had passed, I asked again, Laris, why don't you use your brain? It is meant for thinking, you know. I waited. If you cut yourself off from the light, then your eyes don't work either. No more easy answers. You ask rather than work things out, and then you won't remember. So we rode on. I ignored the continually growling of my stomach. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on any of my videos. See y'all in the next one. Goodbye!